Dear friends, it is a real pleasure to be with you again and share together today's study of the book of Revelation. Our main concern will be about the structure of this book. According to my research, the whole book of Revelation is but one vision, which is quite interesting and not to be neglected. We'll come back to this notion later and realize how important this notion is. Most of the prophets of the Old Testament have received several visions, but in this book we have a 22-chapter unique vision.
Mais ici, nous avons un livre de 22 chapitres et qui n'est qu'une seule vision. Alors, nous allons essayer.
Let us try to analyze how the text is being built. The backbone of this text will show us that the main element is composed of septenaries. That is to say, groups of 7 components, taking place one after another. We have 4 of these septenaries: the 7 churches, the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and the 7 bowls. The 4 septenaries will comprehend most of the book, but not the whole of it. Chapters 2 and 3 deal with the churches. From chapter 6 to the first verses of chapter 8, we are presented with seals. Chapter 8, verse 7, up to the end of chapter 11, deals with the trumpets. The 7 bowls occupy the whole of the chapter 16. As there are gaps between these events, first of all we shall see how to fill them in. Most of these gaps between the septenaries are due to introductions of same. We shall start with the first chart introducing each of the 4 septenaries in form of 4 rectangles. Each of them has a special introduction. May I point out that these introductions are not of my own devising just to fit in the text, but the texts themselves show us how they are linked to the septenary to come. See, for example, the introduction of the first septenary. When John is addressed for the first time, he hears a voice. Let us read it together. I, John, both your brother and companion in the tribulation and kingdom and patience of Jesus Christ, was on the island that is called Patmos for the word of God and for the testimony of Jesus Christ. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I hear behind me a loud voice as of a trumpet saying, "What you see, write in a book and send it to the 7 churches which are in Asia, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamos, to Thyatira, to Sardis, to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea." It is quite obvious that he is asked to write to the 7 churches, and this he will do. But the message will appear only in chapter 2 of the book. In the meantime, there will be a primary vision, which will be an opening vision introducing someone walking in the midst of the 7 candlesticks. Here too, we can see the link with the churches, because in chapter 1, verse 19, we read, "Write the things which you have seen, and the things which are, and the things which will take place after this. The mystery of the 7 stars which you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands which you saw are the 7 churches." Walking amidst the 7 lampstands gives the idea of taking care of the 7 churches. The character represented here is none other than Jesus himself, the one sending the 7 messages. Thus, there is a close relationship between the introduction at the end of chapter 1 and the 7 messages to the 7 churches recorded in chapters 2 and 3. Let's consider now the second introduction to the second septenary. It reveals a book sealed with 7 seals. The Lamb is about to open those seals one after another. But let us have a quick look at this small book. While the seals are being opened in chapter 6, the book itself already appears in chapter 5. Let us read it together, chapter 5, verse 1. And I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. The scroll is held in the right hand of him that sat on the throne, and that one is not one else, but God himself. He already appears in chapter 4, where we read the following in verses 2 and 3. Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne set in heaven, and one sat on the throne, and he who sat there was like a jasper, and a sardius stone in appearance. And there was a rainbow around the throne in appearance like an emerald. Thus we can say that if the scroll is introduced in chapter 5 in the right hand of him who sat on the throne, and the same one who sat on the throne is introduced in chapter 4, therefore, chapters 4 and 5 are just an introduction to the opening of the 7 seals. How can one understand the significance of the opening of the 7 seals if one does not know what the scroll is about and why it is in the hand of him who sits on the throne? We can see that there is here a natural introduction. Let us go now to the third introduction of the 7 trumpets. We read in chapter 8 and verse 7 that the trumpets start to sound. Revelation chapter 8 verse 7. The first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. But verse 2 has already introduced us to the trumpets, so let's read it. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. So, in verse 2, the 7 trumpets are being given, but they will start sounding only as from verse 7. In between, there is a special scene where an angel offers incense on the golden altar. This scene is the introduction to the 7 trumpets. Now, may I invite you to accompany me to the 4th introduction? It concerns the bowls which we can read in chapter 15, verse 1. Then I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them the wrath of God is complete. These plagues are to be identified with the 7 bowls. In fact, we can read it in Revelation chapter 15, verse 7. Then one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God who lives forever and ever. 7 plagues, or 7 bowls, are being given at the very beginning of chapter 15 to 7 angels, but the angels will pour them out only in chapter 16. Thus, there is an introductory scene in chapter 15 before the pouring of the plagues. It is to be noted then that there are 4 passages relating to the 4 septenaries. So, when we shall consider a septenary, we shall be talking about its fulfillment together with the introduction attached to it. For example, about the seals, we shall consider the introduction chapters 4 and 5. and the opening of the seals, chapters 6 and 7. As you can see, we have already filled some gaps. Another aspect to be considered is that when we look closely to these introductions, we find ourselves, for three of them, confronted to the main character, that is Jesus. Let us have a short look now at the first introductory scene, where some interesting insights are being presented. Chapter 1, verse 12 onward. Then I turned to see the voice that spoke with me, and having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the feet, and girded about the chest with a golden band. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes like a flame of fire. His feet were like fine brass, as if refined in a furnace, and his voice as the voice of many waters. He had in his right hand 7 stars. Out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his countenance was like the sun shining in its strength. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead. But he laid his right hand on me, saying to me, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys of Hades and of death." It is obvious that the one speaking here is Jesus, the very one who died and is alive forever, the one who holds the keys of Hades and of death. He also presents himself as the high priest, ministering in the holy place of the sanctuary, walking among the 7 golden candlesticks. Which candlesticks recall the candlestick with its 7 branches that one can see in the holy place of the Israelite sanctuary. It thus concerns Christ, who intervenes here as high priest, the high priest accomplishing his daily service. Let's move now to the second introduction, the one in chapter 4 and 5 concerning the 7 seals. In chapter 5, we are presented with the Lamb who is going to sort out a difficult situation. Shall we read the first verses of this chapter? Revelation 5, 1-6. And I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. Then I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and to loose its seals?" And no one in heaven, or on earth, or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look at it. So I wept much, because no one was found worthy to open and read the scroll or to look at it. But one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals." And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 living creatures, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb, as though it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. Then he came and took the scroll out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. Here again, the Lamb is so easily identified. Jesus. Jesus then is placed in a particular situation. We are no more in the holy place, but have moved in the most holy place, where Jesus takes the scroll. The first 3 verses of chapter 4 reveal the scene. Revelation 4, verses 1-3. After these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet, speaking with me, saying, come up here, and I will show you things which must take place after this. Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he who sat there was like a jasper and a sardius stone in appearance, and there was a rainbow around the throne, in appearance like an emerald. We are here located in the holy place of the sanctuary. A door is open, and John is beckoned to come up hither in another room, which is the room where the throne of God is located. This reveals the most holy place, where the high priest would enter only once a year after a meticulous preparation. Entering the most holy place, we come across Christ's intervention during the Day of Atonement, not as the high priest, but as the Lamb, that is, as a victim. So, his second function in this scene is that of a sacrificed victim. Moving to the third introduction, that of the trumpets, we come to chapter 8, verse 3. Revelation 8:3. Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand. It concerns incense offering on the golden altar. This action is strictly attributed to the high priest, the only one qualified for this service, and Christ is our high priest. This can be certified by the text we read in the book of Hebrews chapter 8, Hebrews 8 verses 1 and 2. Now this is the main point of the things which are saying. We have a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord erected and not man. In this third septenary, Christ accomplishes his ministry in a precise environment. He takes living coals from upon the altar in a censer and goes to offer perfumes for the people. All these elements indicate the annual service which takes place once a year and is called the Day of Atonement or the Yom Kippur. Summarizing the various roles of Jesus Christ in the different introductions, we see him as the high priest, taking care of the candlesticks in the daily service, then as the sacrificed victim, the lamb in the second introduction. In the third, he is once again the high priest during the annual service. It remains now to see how it goes with the fourth introduction. For this, we are going to read the two first verses of chapter 15. Then I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them the wrath of God is complete. And I saw something like a sea of glass mingled with fire, and those who have the victory over the beast, over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, standing on the sea of glass, having harps of God. We can notice here that Jesus is no longer the main character, but it's a crowd, and we ask ourselves why. Simply, because this crowd is the result of Jesus' work of salvation. The main aim of his intercessory work in the sanctuary consisted in preparing a people, which people by his work has gained victory over the enemy. And this very people appears as the main character of the fourth introduction. We can say that this indicates without doubt that the service is closed. And this will be confirmed during our study as we see it at the end of chapter 15. Revelation 15, 7, 8. Then one of the four living creatures gave to the seven angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God who lives forever and ever. The temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one was able to enter the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. What we see here is that through the various structures of the book of Revelation, we are invited to follow Jesus in his intercessory work as high priest in the heavenly sanctuary. This we will demonstrate during our coming presentations. We will then follow Christ and catch the right meaning of the text.
De ce texte.